together this morning, so it's good to see your faces again.
I
Hope you had.
would like the committee chair and my boss to know that I did consider a tie this morning, but it was so warm in my house by the time I was getting ready, I gave up on that. And then Trustee Cates comes through and the chancellor comes through with a tie, so um, I
You know,
chose.
Jeff, I heard they actually texted about it and did it just to make you feel bad. I heard that they conspired and they were
So
like,
so my joke was I almost texted you to say, committee chair, should I wear a tie? Should I wear a tie to this meeting?
for the
But I
record,
thought, no,
if
no, they're
I'm
not
chairing the
here.
meeting, you can wear whatever you want.
There we
So
go. Thank you.
Joe is here wearing his summer finest. You're
Well,
fine. You're fine.
if Lee Softly's there, I still think of her as a judge, and you can't appear before a judge without a tie.
That's a good point. That's a good point. All right. Give it a couple more minutes. Beth, you can let me know. I think we should be close to a quorum.
Yes, you have a quorum.
Yeah, so we'll just give it one more minute to let people join. And then we'll kick off this meeting. All right, why don't we go ahead then and take the roll and then we'll kick it off.
Trustee Kane,
I'm here.
trustee Alexander,
Here.
trustee Cates, trustee Moore.
Here.
Thank you.
Great. I also see Trustee Worth has joined us and glad to see others have joined us as well. Jason, good to see you. I haven't seen you in a minute. Good to see you. So what did we talk about the plan for this day? This committee has not met since last year. That is no way an indication that the strategic plan work has not been in full force. We know that because the work of the strategic plan primarily, and most of it, starts in and is overseen by the other committees of the board, the other standing committees. And for those of you who attend those meetings, many of us this week for many, many hours. We know that every one of those agendas includes an update on strategic planning initiatives and links in the board cover sheets to the strategic plan itself. So for today's meeting, we're going to do a few things. I want to talk through at the top, sort of set the structure of the meeting, and then talk a little bit about where we're going to go from here. And I particularly want to thank Jeff and Carolyn for all of their hard work in helping prep for today, in addition to Heather Ball, who did an incredible amount of work helping us prepare some of the visuals and the materials for today. So the big picture view is that this committee sits on the balcony of the strategic plan. We are the committee that's responsible for the overall oversight, but we are not going to do a deep dive on every single initiative because those things are regularly covered in other committees. What we're going to do today is do a big picture look at where we are toward meeting the goals of the commitments of the plan. And we're going to talk about the factors that have changed since we initially drafted this plan just a few years ago. And then we're going to talk about later in the meeting, we're going to do the big picture, the factors that have affected us. Then we're going to do a deeper dive into specifically the initiatives that the Strategic Planning Committee holds responsibility for. And then we're going to talk about where we go from here, including some work we'd like to propose in the fall. So that is the overall plan for today. This meeting will end by 3 p.m. It may end earlier depending on how it goes, but I appreciate in advance everyone's engagement. Jeff or Carolyn, do you want to add anything at the top about the plan for today or what we hope to accomplish?
Oh, sounds good.
Thank
Okay,
you.
well then I'll turn it over to the two of you and I'll just check in. Chancellor, do you have anything you want to say up top?
Not a whole lot. Ryan would otherwise be with us, but he has an AI presentation, state commission, so he could not join. And so I just wanted to explain that. Other than that, I think you will hear that we have done what we said we would do, and that is to implement the strategic plan. And obviously, some of the big wins that we've had in the last couple of years are emblematic of that. Again, record numbers of students coming back to us is a big thing. Modernizing our approach to building a freshman class is certainly part of that. But we'll talk about all of those things, and very happy to be with you all.
Great. Thank you, Chancellor. So Jeff and Carolyn, I'll turn it over to you to kick off our conversation today about where we stand big picture.
So Heather, would you start the slides and share the first one with us? So as Trustee Kane noted, we're responsible for the balcony view or the overall view. And as a reminder, we wanted to put together an introductory slide right after this one, Heather, if you want to move forward to just for trustees who know this language, and for those who are new to it, Trustee Worth in particular. So the strategic plan is organized under 5 broad commitments or major areas of activity across the system. Under each commitment are actions or areas where we intend to do work as a function of this guiding plan. And then under each action are specific goals that are concrete steps we are taking to operationalize our actions and in turn fulfill our commitments. So commitments at the top is the broadest level, followed by actions, followed by goals. The commitments are the organizing categories, and then both actions and goals contain work that we're attempting to complete. So we're tracking both actions and goals across the entire plan under all 5 commitments. And you can see here the areas that are reflected in the plan under those 5 commitments. I think you can move from here to the next slide. And I think this really, to put this in perspective, and I know Carolyn and Trustee Kane and I were all excited about this slide, which was produced by Vice Chancellor Lowe using AI. By the way, the entire slide deck was developed by Heather Ball using AI. So in all of our presentations now, Carolyn and I were talking last week saying we can't offer presentations to board committees or the full board anymore, not developed by GenSpark or another AI resource, because we'll look bad compared to the stuff that Ryan is putting out. So we have moved entirely in that direction. That's where we are. This slide, which Trustee Kane very helpfully guided us in developing. So you're seeing the percentages of goals across the commitments. We are tracking progress in a couple of different designators, and I want to thank Heather for the contribution she made to this very recently. So there are goals that are complete, things that are one and done. Then there are goals that are complete and ongoing, meaning it's an area of continuous operation for us. We've done what the goal asked us to do in the plan, but we will continuously be refining that work. I know Vice Chancellor Lowe or Vice Chancellor Franny Mundy could give you examples from their areas, and so can Carolyn and I, of things that are done but have to continuously be worked on, maintained, or further honed in that sense. And then there are goals that are in progress. With respect to things that we have completed or are complete and ongoing or are in progress across this plan, these are the percentages, and they underscore the Chancellor's point. We are doing the work of the plan. If you take the plan by total activity across the commitments in 2 years time under a 5-year plan, or 40% of the time allocated for this plan, we have completed or are complete and ongoing or are in progress in just over 80% of the goals in this plan. And if you divide the plan by the actions, and parse it out that way, it once again comes to 80%. So you can see in the area of finance and infrastructure, 100% of the
I
goals
was
are
actually
either.
going to ask if maybe
Yeah.
because Ryan Lowe made this event and made his area obviously is at 100, but I'm going to go ahead and believe him because I've known him for 20 years
I,
and he's exceptionally good. But Roger, I mean, see what
I,
earlier today, I told you were going to get an A+.
I, I want to object to the attack on Ryan Lowe's character there.
I would
Uncalled
never
for.
attack Ryan Lowe's character. I love him, but I mean this morning at FFT it came up, right? And I said you're gonna see you get high marks, and you do here. Jeff, I don't want to go on to the next slide without stopping for some conversation and questions about these numbers. And I will say because leave the slide up, please, Heather. Because of the slide being up, if you want to say something, if you could use the hand raise function, that'd be really helpful. So that I can see you because it's hard to sometimes see.
Yeah, so I would like to add, excuse me, just a couple of quick notes on some of them. And I don't want to say too much now because we are going to talk a bit more in future slides. But on a couple of them, some of the reasons that they may appear to be a bit lower. So for instance, the destination for education and work is 55.6. And again, as Jeff said, we're only partway through the plan. So that actually would be what one would expect to see. That would be an average number. It looks a little lower because we've done so well in some of the other areas. But that is actually that particular commitment area houses some things that we have intentionally, for some reasons, perhaps put off for a bit, or that happens to also house the work around a system marketing plan. And as you know, that work took a little bit longer for us to kick off and just started really implementing April 1st. So those goals really have just begun to be tracked. So those will start to pick up quite rapidly now that we're moving beyond April 1st and tracking. So some of these you'll see moving quite quickly as we move forward, but it isn't necessarily a reflection of things that are behind or not getting the traction they need. The timing is a little further down the plan.
Thanks, Carolyn. I want to pause to see if people have questions about this. I will say this was not the reason I want to pause. Also, this was not in your materials in advance, and that's because as I got some questions from a couple members of the board and also my own reflection with Carolyn and Jeff, I was like, we need a visual to show us how we're doing under each of these commitments. So, questions, thoughts, reflections.
And I think I would just say one more. This is, again, as Jeff said, across the entire plan, not just our strategic plan goals. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, Trustee Alexander. Barbara, go ahead.
Thank you. Are we going to, this is very helpful, absolutely. And I understand the pros and cons of the various numbers not being entirely one way or another. I understand that there's a process involved here. But what I would hope at some point during our discussion today that we can identify the risks and the potentials for not achieving our goals as we intend, and what barriers or external factors or internal factors might question our ability to get where we want to go as set forth in the plan. And that's something that I think this committee should be spending most of their time on. But is that coming up here in a structured way?
Yeah, that I think my intention was to drive to that conversation at the end of the meeting after we've gone through not just the big picture look, but then also the review of the factors that have impacted us so far, which is going to be the next slide we're going to talk about, because I think that will help inform in a robust way our ability to talk about what we're going to do going forward. And then we're going to talk about how we're going to have a fall meeting specifically dedicated to any changes that we might want to make at the midway point. So preview of what's coming.
Thank you very much.
Great question. Thank you, Barbara. Other questions about this look?
And if it's helpful for trustees and others, that last bucket, unified catalog, principally reflects guidance shared with us by NECHI at the time of our October 2022 evaluation for unified accreditation, and then the letter from the NETCHI Commission that followed in March of 2023. So we were given a whole series of areas for improvement clustered in Commitment 5 in the plan, but elsewhere in the plan as well. And we've grouped those as unified accreditation goals and actions under the plan.
Thanks, Jeff. Well, in that case, unless there are other questions, let's move on to the next slide. Knowing that I'm going to just talk about this one for a second before I don't know if Carolyn, you or Jeff is going to talk about it, but about some of the details. This was also not in your previous materials, because again, as we were reflecting on the conversation in this meeting, we finally said, let's write this down so we have these in front of us. When we developed this plan, which was started more than 3 years ago, when we finalized it just over 2 years ago, I remember when one of our former board members joined the board, she said, there's hardly a reference to AI. And when I think about how quickly AI has changed for us in the last 2 years, if we were starting to write this plan a year ago or now, AI probably would have looked different in how it came about. But when you think about the fact that we started drafting this 3+ years ago, it really is to me, it's one of the most powerful examples of how quickly things have changed. Not to mention, of course, political changes and financial changes, world changes. So we wanted to sort of put down in front of us, and we can use this slide again later, the kinds of things that have impacted, or things we couldn't see because despite my best efforts, the crystal ball that I want to have doesn't work. But Jeff or Carolyn, do you want to talk more about this and sort of how we brought this together?
I can share 2 examples that speak directly to Trustee Alexander's good comment from a moment ago. So Barbara, just from these few factors that Emily and Carolyn and I identified relatively quickly. I mean, I think trustees are all familiar with them. Let me give you 2 examples of both opportunities and areas where we're keeping a close eye. So the growth and spread of competency-based education in your pace. We have as a major goal in the plan significant increase in the number of online programs delivered across our system. And we also have, as trustees know, ambitious enrollment goals and ambitious retention goals. So we have in the recent development of Your Pace expanding to Farmington and Fort Kent, we are going to increase the number of programs delivered online thanks to the leadership of Presidents Hedin and McDonnell in partnership with President Rice and others. We are going to see continued growth in enrollment through those programs by all current measures. We don't know what the pace of enrollment growth over time will be. We can't perfectly predict that, but we have continued to see healthy gains in enrollment, as trustees know, at UMPI, and we expect more of the same for programs to be delivered at Farmington and Fort Kent. So one area of opportunity that we've identified as a factor influencing the plan is something that is both reshaping the look of our overall system, but also helping us achieve other goals that aren't directly related to it within the plan. So Your Pace becomes a header, and several of our goals follow behind it in ways that we didn't necessarily anticipate, but that have been very advantageous and helpful to us as a system. The second example I'll give, trustees are familiar with because we just discussed it at ASA on Monday. We didn't know when Chancellor Malloy developed the Adult Degree Completion Initiative and began to identify funding for each of our universities to hire staff, begin marketing, recruiting, advising for returning adult degree completers, that we would be moving into the world of 90 credit degree programs. But the fact that we have those adult degree facing operations in place at all of our universities in advance of our effort to then develop 90 credit programs, which weren't on our radar, to Trustee Kane's point, when we began drafting this plan almost 3 years ago, those 2 things ended up dovetailing wonderfully in ways we couldn't have anticipated. So I know, Trustee Alexander, you also want to talk about risks. I did just want to identify those 2 wonderful unexpected opportunities that have helped us both fulfill goals in the plan and move our system forward in ways that we couldn't have predicted.
And we'll definitely talk more about forward-going risks in a little while. But Other comments or questions? What comments or questions? Oh, Carolyn, did you want to add anything? Sorry, I didn't mean.
I think mine was very similar to what Jeff was going to say. I was going to highlight, UMS Transforms and the Alfond contributions. We continue to see success in that area and initiatives coming out of the funds that we are able to access through the UMS Transforms grant. And with that, it opens up opportunities under many of the commitments that we have here, and lots of opportunity to pair with what it is that we're doing across that initiative. And then at the same time, we just came out of an FFT meeting where we talk about some of the recent state and federal actions, and there's a lot of unknown there. Obviously, that's going to be a bit perhaps more on the challenges side, things that we need to be looking at, things that could be some of the risks that perhaps Trustee Alexander might be thinking about or considering. And these are things that are unfolding as we're having this conversation. So I think, again, as Trustee Kane mentioned, we're going to talk kind of about next steps at the end that will give us a chance to talk about all the leads, talk with all the leads on these different commitments between now and October, and try and come up with a more robust answer to how all of the things that you see on this slide may impact each one of the goals that we have listed in the plan.
Thanks, Carolyn. Do others have comments or questions they want to talk about on this slide about some of these factors, internal, external, or unseen originally, that have impacted the work of the plan? Great. So we'll have a bigger conversation about how these kinds of factors will affect us going forward. But now we'll shift into out of the balcony and into the specific work of the strategic planning committee, and the items that are assigned to us, or that we assigned to ourselves. And I think, Carolyn, are you going to share the spreadsheet, or are we going to, is that where we're going to go from here?
Well, Heather is.
Heather is, but I'll turn it back over to you and Jeff.
Yes.
So Heather, do you want to share the status spreadsheet? Thank you. So this spreadsheet is a picture of the fun of being a vice chancellor in the University of Maine system right here. This is the best part of all. No, this is actually a tremendous amount of work done by Heather Ball and others to put together a spreadsheet identifying all of our goals across the plan, laid out by commitment and action. On the left, they're color coded according to the different areas in the plan. And then on the right, you see the categories, excuse me, that I spoke about at the top. So we have complete and ongoing. We have in progress. We have, in a couple cases, on hold, and I think Carolyn and I will say more about that in a minute. And then a few goals that are not yet begun. Again, that's in the context of having completed or finding ourselves completed ongoing for roughly 80% of the goals across the overall plan at this point. So I know we've had good questions from trustees in the past. Are we tracking everything in a fine-grained way across the entire plan? The answer is a definitive yes. So while within the purview of this committee, we'll be focused today on highlighting some of the goals that have been assigned to the strategic planning committee itself, we do have a tracker. I also want to compliment Vice Chancellors Freeney Mundy and Lowe. They and their teams also both have very sophisticated tracking mechanisms. You've seen it at FFT because Ryan has embedded it in the regular work of the committee. So each of the Vice Chancellors to the committees or the reporting outlets assigned to them has a tracker, and then we put all that together in one. So we have an overall look, the balcony look, to use Trustee Kane's term, for everything at all times as we attend meetings of FFT, HRLR, and ASA, and as we hear presentations from President and Vice Chancellor Freeney Mundy, either to the full board or at FFT or both, we add goals in partnership with Jason Charlin and her team to make sure that from all those sources we are continuously updating our spreadsheet so we know the status of every goal at all times. Carolyn, anything you want to add to
No,
that?
except that we flashed that up on the screen,
I
obviously
was about to
not.
say, you might want to put it back up just so
Yeah,
people
but
can appreciate
well,
it.
we didn't intend for anyone really to read it. It was just a visual because oftentimes when we start talking and say, well, we have a tracker and we do this and that, we just wanted you to have a visual of this is what we mean. We have a long list of every commitment. We have it spreadsheet really, and it's color coded and off to the side. We have this very basic system. It's in progress, it's completed, it's on hold, and this is what we're talking about. And sometimes for me, I'm a more visual person, and when we were in a meeting and we were talking about the tracker, I said to Emily, can we just flash it on the screen so that they understand what we mean when we're talking about the tracker? It's simple, it's just a piece of paper really that we keep things. This is how we're right now managing it. And then actually this document is what we passed off to Ryan Lowe yesterday, and within 2 minutes he gave us a whole bunch of different materials back, which we just gave Emily a few, but he had podcasts and he had reports and he had all kinds of different materials based on this. But it's very interesting. But this is when we're talking about our tracker, it's literally just keeping track of where we're at on each goal.
I did specifically want you to speak to the on hold items and what that means, because I think that's an example of a factor that has changed and how it's manifesting itself. And so I'm not sure if it's Joan that maybe wants to speak to that, because I think this has to do with some of the federal executive orders. I don't.
Are you able to enlarge it a little, Heather?
That's a great. So it's the one about support of research and climate change, and under that, things related to climate change and DEI are the on hold items.
Okay, so I can speak to the climate change. As you know, of course, that is an area that this current administration has determined is not a major focus for us. So there you see it. It's DPHE 4.1. It actually is a destination for public higher ed goal, which was intended to market us, as you see here, for a focus on climate change and environmental sustainability. We are not backing away at all from our work in those fields, but we are absolutely changing the way we describe and talk about it to be consistent with where there are federal dollars available, and we have large numbers of faculty who are actively engaged in studying related topics that fall under these categories. The tricky part is how to use that in marketing right now, because the public discussion of this is all over the place, right? We have a sizable number of folks here in Maine who will be on each side or any side of this issue. And so we don't yet have a path to using that, or not even really sure that right now it's the best thing to use that as a marketing focus. There would be other foci that might work, relative to Maine's natural resources and the beauty of the environment in Maine and things like that always have appealed. And some of that is happening, but we're holding on this until things settle down at the federal level.
That makes sense. And similarly, as we've had in public discussion and board conversations about DEI work. So that's very helpful. But that's one thing I wanted to highlight on this spreadsheet, because I think it's that level of detail. Sorry, President Franny Mundy, go ahead.
No, that's right. That's fine.
Great. So thank you. We can pull it back down now. But are there other questions? It's a lot to look at. But we wanted to show the level of detail because every one of the committee has some tracker similar to that. Are there questions about that tracker? Or how those items are being reviewed before we get into more of the details? Okay, fantastic. Let's keep rolling then. Heather, I think you can put the slides back up. And Jeff and Carolyn, I'll turn it back over to you.
So in this area, we wanted to just show the trustees work that's being done in an example of work being done under each of the commitments. So 5 slides with examples across the plan, but also we have updates to share that are specific to, I'm just trying to think of how best to do this, Emily. We can start here, or we can start with specific goals in the plan assigned to our committee. Either way is fine with me.
I think you can just go through these slides as is and just be sure to highlight the strategic planning pieces.
Sure. So you're seeing examples here of things that have been worked on. First one having to do with Engine for Innovation. There, I would say there's been an enormous amount of work done by President Vice Chancellor Farini Mundy and her team, and also on the business need and workforce side by Jen O'Leary in strategic partnerships at the system level. And in fact, I think some very collaborative and good work done between Jen O'Leary and Jake Ward and the Spire group at UMaine at that point of intersection between business and workforce needs, where Spire comes at it, where Jen comes at it from their various connections and contacts, and both of them really serving the system in a tremendous way. We've seen significant number of goals fulfilled in this area of the plan, and we wanted to just give you a picture of work that's gone on in under Commitment 1 at this stage. There's also, of course, goals that have been fulfilled already in Commitment 1 specific to each of the Vice Chancellor's areas, each of the commitments, but this is one example from that piece of the plan. Happy to answer any questions that trustees may have about this.
We have similar slides for each of the commitments, so just know that flow is coming, but also if anyone has comments. Okay, let's keep going.
Yeah, in this area, principally the academic portfolio area. So trustees are aware of their ongoing support for new programs, both really in the last 2 years in areas like the ones we discussed on Monday. So areas of core activity for the state and for the system, nursing, education, business, but also a critical forestry management program for Fort Kent that President Hedin spent a significant amount of time developing. AI certificates. We have provosts at each of our universities actively looking to either develop or complete AI certificates. At least 2 have come forward through the Chief Academic Officers Council so far. And we also, of course, on the non-credit professional development side, have the wildly popular class that Vice Chancellor Lowe is teaching this fall, that is being reorganized as a sort of a lunchtime set of AI sessions that we expect to have enormous popularity in the fall and beyond. So we try to train our workforce on AI from the inside out. Workforce readiness, I mentioned that a minute ago, and Carolyn can certainly say more about the work that Jen O'Leary has done in partnership with her and her team. Adult education, we spoke about that just a few minutes ago. And then I would say when it comes to innovation, we are looking just as hard at AI applications on the academic side as we are on the infrastructural side or on the finance side of the house, because innovations achieved through AI do 2 things. They help our students prepare for the workforce of the future, which is already here, and it is an AI-oriented workforce, but also to the extent that we can find AI efficiencies on the academic side of the house, we can free up dollars for other initiatives in the plan that require resources, keeping our promise to the trustees that the plan would be funded out of existing resources. The redeployment of existing resources is the way that we will do that for goals not yet fulfilled in this plan. And I'm happy, Carolyn, if you want to add anything in this area.
Yes, I think the ones that I have really would relate to both Commitment 1 and 2, because a lot of what reports through the Strategic Planning Committee are some of those building system-wide networks. And when we're talking about it's workforce readiness, it's those people who are in their careers. So when we are talking about the work at the system office through the Strategic Initiatives Office that Jen O'Leary and the Chancellor are doing, there's also a whole team at the University of Maine that President Farini Mundy's folks, they have a whole team of people that work on it, but also across the system at the different campuses, there are various folks who are assigned to do this type of work, but we really are trying to coordinate that more so it has more of a system feel, and that when the employers feel that we're working together, we're combining what we can and consolidating what we can as far as how we communicate and what we're talking about, and lots of initiatives going out there as system initiatives, so that it eases that sort of pathway for employers to come to us and to find us and learn more about us. But also for those students that are entering our universities. It's that workforce readiness and career readiness, a lot of it again through UMS Transforms and the work that we're doing through that initiative. So it's whether it's the learner coming to us or the folks who are already out in the workplace and they're trying to just reskill, we're making sure that these are system-wide initiatives, and whether it's a campus who really is resourced to do it or a campus who may not be, that we're trying to open the opportunity across the system. So that's what a lot of these initiatives and what reports up through the strategic plan committee focuses on. And we've had great success in moving these initiatives forward in the first 2 years.
Great. We'll pause on commitment to see if there are questions or things anyone else wants to add.
Can I ask a question, Emily?
Yeah, go for it.
This is slightly, I guess, slightly off topic. And what you said before caught my attention about how when we worked on this plan 3 years ago, whatever it was, AI wasn't really even on our radar at that point, and it obviously is permeating every part of life at this point. And particularly when it comes to academic programs, are we looking for ways to adjust our gen ed requirements to take into account the increasing importance of AI skills for anybody in our society?
Yes. So, Trustee Cates, I
Great
typically each fall and spring, with the indulgence of the presidents, meet with their faculty senates or assemblies once during the fall and spring semesters. Almost always with the president there, or in all cases aware that I'm visiting, and I try to share either an update or a question or an initiative with each of them across the semester, so they're all hearing the same thing and they're all getting the same update. So because faculty, of course, talk, and that's a wonderful thing that they're communicating with their colleagues across the system. There'll be 2 topics for this fall, and one of them is this. So I know President McDonald sent a wonderful note to his campus earlier this week, I believe, following Vice Chancellor Lowe's AI presentation at Farmington last week, about the need for a flourishing role for AI in general education. We think that's true across our system. It is a challenge because general education is an area that sits with the faculty as a curricular matter, and yet it's also a responsibility on the management side to ensure that students are getting an education that prepares them for the workforce. The chancellor led a very thoughtful conversation about this at the retreat we held earlier this month, chancellors, vice chancellors, and presidents. And this is front and center for the coming year. We cannot afford to be delivering a baseline education that is not shot through with AI, for all the reasons that you've heard before, and for some of the reasons that the summary of areas of focus that Vice Chancellor President Freeney Mundy shared earlier today on the FFT call. These things, all these areas of scientific inquiry and scientific knowledge, are all going to be platformed on AI going forward. There's no escaping that.
And in addition, Jeff just mentioned that this was a topic that the chancellor had on our recent retreat. And in addition to that, he had also charged Jen O'Leary, as she's out meeting with employers, he asked her to survey the employers and ask not about courses necessarily that someone might need, but asking employers what specific skills, if you're hiring graduates of our system, what specific skills in your work area do you think that they should have that relate to AI, like really drilling down into the skill level so that we can kind of think about that and better prepare what we might be doing in our classroom environment. So we have some of that information too that we're working with.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Carolyn. I see President Freeney Mundy. Go for it, Joan.
Yes, thanks. I would just remind us too that the board charged an ad hoc AI task force to meet over the past several months. Ryan chairs that. Ray Rice and I both sit on that group, and the group is coming forward with its report and recommendations in the coming weeks. So we have a lot of AI focus at different levels from different directions.
That's great. And the timing of that could be very good as this committee re-looks at the plan in the fall too, to have those available to us. So that's awesome. President McDonald.
So I think this raises a really challenging issue. As Jeff said, what we're trying to do at Farmington is to infuse AI into our Gen Ed program so that a student could take a AI infused Gen Ed, a kind of interdisciplinary program, which has AI linked to it. But it does require the faculty enough faculty to participate. And so that's a job that we're trying to do. We have some faculty who are in the forefront of that. Others are running away from AI. And it does raise, I think, a larger issue of the control of the curriculum by faculty versus what the market needs. And those can come into conflict. And how we deal with that, I think, is a challenge. So AI is one of those issues where we really need to get the faculty on board. But there are other issues as well, where workforce requires a certain skill, and yet faculty, particularly faculty who are teaching in Gen Ed, which is a kind of captive audience, may not be as focused on that market direction. I think it's a challenge for the administration of all of our universities.
Thank you. And I think it's an interesting, if we think back to the before times, as in before the pandemic, when we had so much resistance to the use of this technology, and Zoom and other things, even for meetings like this, and how it became an inevitability, right? Because there really became no other option in a way where you could actually engage people. And I feel like AI, and I can only speak for myself personally, certainly has taken on that feel as well. It's sort of like, get on board or you're going to get run over, right? Is what it feels like with AI. Learn how to use it effectively. As one of the faculty members said at the ASA meeting, I can't remember which one it was, on Monday, learning how to ask AI the right questions, right? And be thoughtful is a real skill. So hopefully, Joe, what you're talking about, we can make it become inevitable for everybody's work, because it will make us stronger and more nimble for sure. Thank you for that comment. Are there any other comments that we were on commitment to? Any other? Or Roger, did that answer your question?
It did. Thank you very much.
But I want to just check on that.
Heather, I think we can go to the next
No, let's
slide.
go to the next slide and keep moving and keep the conversation going. Go for it.
So Trustee Kane, just one example here, and I'll thank you for it. Trustee Kane made a smart comment during our prep meeting on Monday that made me reconsider how to share this slide. So I've had a couple trustees, and I know Carolyn's had the same, ask, just out of curiosity, how long does it take to fulfill any particular goal in this plan? In some cases, and I know Jason, Charlene, and others on the call can confirm this, some of the goals were easier to complete. I mean, within a couple months of the plan being ratified by the board, we checked off goals in several areas, but some of them are much longer term. So one example, and I'll give you the brief version of it, but thanks to funding supplied in one-time strategic dollars late last summer by the Chancellor and Vice Chancellor Lowe, we pursued and completed a system-wide mental health resource contract. It took 10 months from beginning to end, with Heather Ball, who's on this screen, and our chief student affairs officers from all the universities working on it pretty much every other week or so across those 10 months to go through a process of speaking with existing vendors and talking with faculty groups, the Faculty Governance Council, going through a series of conversations and discussions, identifying terms of the contract, getting the contract in place, signing it. It will launch at the end of August, and we will have a system-wide resource. All but one of our universities has signed on for it, and it will be a mental health resource for students across the system for the coming year. That was not one of the easier goals in the plan to complete. Others much simpler, but I did want to give an example of scale. I know Carolyn, Joan, Ryan, and I all have had goals that were quick and other goals that are much bigger hills to climb. They're all worth it, but this is one that took some time and effort to pull off.
Thanks, Jeff. other comments on or questions about commitment 3? All right, let's move on to commitment 4.
Carolyn, did you want to say anything here by way of just general context around this important subject?
Sure. I mean, obviously, at the time when we wrote this, we had a different focus in mind for how we were going to tackle trying to strengthen our DEI perspectives. And with the changes and things that have been happening at the federal level, we have been sort of taking a different approach, looking at this, thinking about what changes may have to be made. Some of that was happening prior to the federal transition anyway. There were some offices where we were just looking at how to best serve our students and what they may need for services, or what different changes or slight revisions should have been made. And we were starting to have those conversations. And also just by some, there were some position changes or some retirements, and we started to look at the programs that were being offered. And when all of that was taking place, and then during the transition, we have put some of these on hold. We've moved some forward that have made sense, but behind it all, we've just made sure that we are offering the needed services, making sure that students are know that there are offices and staff available should they need assistance. And we're trying to make sure that we are not certainly not leaving anyone out, or not excluding anyone, or not offering a particular service that a student needs to get to our campus, to get into a program, to enroll, to house, whatever it might be. But some of these just simply have to be either put on hold or revised slightly in order to move forward. So this was one of the areas across the board, across the plan, that we need to take a look at more closely.
Great. And before I go to Barbara, one clarifying question. So this might be an example of something where we take a look in the fall about if we want to make some changes to how we think about these goals that we have. That might be an area, just stating maybe the obvious, but.
Correct. And this would stem everywhere from, in the classroom, from academic descriptions and teachings all the way up through to our practices and policies in HR. I mean, it stems all the way through our universities and system. So
great. Thank you. Trustee Alexander.
I guess I'm a little concerned about the hesitancy about implementing our plan in this regard. I don't know exactly what's on hold. We have state law we have an obligation to comply with that requires us to do exactly what I think we've historically been doing in this area. So I understand the rhetoric floating around, but certainly we can do no less, and should do a heck of a lot more to emphasize our compliance with our own state law and our own state educational guidelines. I understand that there are NCAA athletic guidelines, and that we've said publicly we comply with them. I'm not questioning any of that, but I don't think we should hide our hat about this. And maybe more discussion later in the fall about what exactly is going on here that needs redoing. I'm not sure.
Yeah, and it may not. It's a good point. I think, but it's worth a conversation. President Pretty Money, were you raising your hand? Sorry. You weren't. I apologize. I thought you were. Barbara, I share your sentiment. I appreciate your comments on it very, very deeply. Yeah. Other comments or thoughts about commitment 4?
But
Go ahead, Chancellor. Yeah.
Yeah. This is kind of a third rail for a lot of folks, and I certainly understand that. I think our desire is to not lessen our commitments to our employees and our students. in this area. However, what we are confronting and continue to confront on a daily basis is what the federal government is doing about the use of these words. Now, if we can find a way to honor our commitment without using certain words and replacing those words with other words that have real meaning and real support, as opposed to losing, somewhere between $50 and $200 million. It's a fine line that we are attempting to walk, and I probably should have just remained quiet about it, but the reality is this is the hard work that we're doing on a daily basis. To the trustees, I certainly have the same feelings about what's happening in Washington and the orders or the threats or the withdrawals that we're getting with respect to federal dollars. Again, I think what you're attempting to do is to find the road forward that allows us to honor our commitments, but not necessarily use terms that are likely to cost us millions of dollars.
Thank you, Chancellor. Now I do see President Freeney Mundy who is joining us.
Yes, I would just, this is a good conversation. I would just add that General Counsel, Eamon and Lisa particularly, have been extraordinarily important and central in all of our discussions on this topic. And so going forward, as we look more deeply at all of this with all of you, they will need to be a part of that.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you both for weighing in on this.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
if
go
I could
ahead.
just add one more point here.
Go for it.
There's a difference between what our strategic plan says and what we're doing to implement our plan and what might be done to alter the nature of the research dollar applications that might be going to Washington for funding. I think those are two separate things, and I totally understand that distinction. But we have some lawsuits going on about whether or not Maine has violated, the equal rights, Title IX and everything else. And so far, there's no court anywhere that's ever made a finding that we're doing anything wrong or that we violated anything. So I just want to keep in mind that I think we're on the right path with regard to our reliance on state law, which we have an obligation to comply with. And to the extent research applications can be done in a way that satisfies some folks with the use of different words, that's a separate tactical thing, not an abandonment of our strategic plan's language. I hope we can keep those two things separate.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's and who knows with the way things have been going, what this conversation will even look like in 8 weeks or 12 weeks. I think that's another factor as we think about how quickly things have changed over the past 5 months and changed and then changed back and then changed back again in some cases. And we'll be mindful of all of those things. Thank you all for that conversation. Last call for comments on commitment 4. All right, let's move on.
I can do this one briefly. This is a case of the tortoise and the hare. So 4 years ago, the chancellor identified the development of a unified catalog as a top priority under my predecessor, Robert Placido, and then it fell on my shoulders. We spent a couple of years developing updates to transfer policies and practices in partnership with faculty and professional staff, working with the registrars, working with websites, working with Carolyn in her office, made enormous progress in all of the areas of our transfer processes that are non-technical in nature or not based in the actual student information system, Main Street work that we do. The unified catalog effort on the IT side candidly had stalled. When Robert Placido came aboard, he turned that tortoise into a hare, and we ended up crossing the finish line on a number of interconnected initiatives almost at the same time. And we're able to come to the board in May saying we have completed the work of the Unified Catalog project on the side of articulation agreements, processes, policies, the transfer main agreement the Chancellor and President Degler signed last summer. All of these sets of groupings, along with an updated, revamped Main Street, a fully functioning unified catalog, and a radically improved course search mechanism that Robert and I will be telling faculty senates and assemblies about this fall. So this was a matter of what ended up being good timing, and we have brought to fruition the vision that the Chancellor had for how we would do business through our processes and through our policies to recruit more students and to make their experience joining us as seamless as possible.
Great. Carolyn, anything to add on this one? No. Any questions or comments about this slide and the unified accreditation work as it relates to strategic planning? Okay, I agree. This one was pretty straightforward. So let's keep this conversation going as we look to what happens next. And so we have one more slide that this is going to tee up the conversation that Barbara teased at the top in thinking about, I think the words Trustee Alexander used were risk, barriers, external and internal factors that might prevent us or accelerate us related to the plan. But let's move to the final slide, and Jeff and Carolyn, I'll turn it back to you.
So I think all we would say here is that in preparation for the discussion about next steps that Trustee Kane just mentioned, we would remind the trustees of the work that's been done to date and the process that we've established at this point. So we collaborate, we report, we measure, of course, and we are trying as best as possible at all times to adapt. I think you would hear from each of the 4 vice chancellors and probably from all the presidents as well that there are goals in the plan that look different now by virtue of changing circumstances and in some cases even changing terminology. Part of what I would hope to do at our meeting later this year is to speak about goals on the academic side of the portfolio that either have been completed through other means or that may no longer be salient to the work that the trustees want us to do by virtue of having aged out over 2.5 years since the adoption of the plan. Carolyn, anything? Yeah.
Yes, and I think everyone on the screen has worked at one point or another with a plan like this or something similar. We were recently talking about the state of Maine's 10-year economic plan, and they did the same thing. Partway through, you sort of take a step back, you pause, you look at the process. Has it served you well? Have you been able to use the process the way that you had hoped to? Has your tracking, your reporting, has it all been appropriate? And then the goals themselves, as Jeff said, especially their plan was a 10-year plan. So things clearly change over a 10-year period. Ours is a 5-year plan and things have changed just in the last 30 days. So it's time to maybe just take a pause, look at the process, look at the content, and then look at how we as a system, as a board, what do our goals look like? So maybe time to do a quick refresh and maybe have some conversations around what happens next. So I think that's kind of what Emily would like to do with you all next.
Yeah. So what I'd like to do is you can take the slide down is to start that conversation now about things in the plan, questions people have, things you want to see, things you want to make sure are being considered as we think about a mid-plan assessment, if you will, of where we are and how we're doing things. And I want to open this up to everyone, but I will, Barbara, do you want to start this off? Are there things you want to start up front, just since you teed us up at the top a little bit with this?
Well, I don't pretend to have a well thought out list. And I was hoping that the staff would identify what they see as risk factors, external and internal. The obvious risk factor for all of us is the federal budget, potential reduction in Pell Grants, withdrawal of all these research dollars, what impact that has on our ability to continue to offer the intent we all had with regard to the R1 status and the expansion of the research programs among all the campuses, in terms of getting students involved at a very early stage in doing research. So just taking a look at that whole set of implications and trying to figure out if we weather the storm and just sort of sit tight and see what's going to happen, which is a legitimate response, or whether there are some things we should do here that recognize the problem and try to come up with some approaches that would ameliorate it, or at least keep us moving forward. So that has implications for finance, as well as research and programs involving that whole area. I would like to see a structured discussion of unified accreditation from the perspective of the development of the actual programs that we're coming up with here. What is holding it? Are there any concerns? Should we have concerns, I guess is the way, about the level of coordination, the development of multi-university programs? Too many of the programs I'm seeing come through pretty much fully developed by one university, and the tagline is, oh, we're willing to work with everybody to make this program available. So I'm more interested in the internal aspects of that issue, learning more about it, and doing what we can to keep moving it forward, setting the goalposts in a way that would make it more of the approach that I think a lot of us are hopeful to do. I must say that your PACE thing is a wonderful example. It's taken a while to get the others involved, but it's happening, and that's a really good model, I should say. So those are the only things I could think of offhand.
That's
Others
great.
may, of course, have other issues.
Yeah, and that's one. So we are going to do another meeting of this committee on Wednesday, October 29th, in the equivalent spot in the afternoon after FFT. So Roger and I will spend a lot of time together that day. But that is one of the committee weeks. And so I think, Barbara, I'm taking notes. I know Carolyn and Jeff and Heather are as well, as we think about the kinds of things we want to make sure are covered. So that's good. I also think that factor sheet that we talked about earlier, that slide that listed the things we didn't know 2 or 3 years ago that now we do. To me, that's the starting list of, now that we know these things, what does the second half of this plan look like? And that's the kind of conversation we can't have that today because we just built that for today. That's why we're going to have another meeting in the fall so that we can specifically look at, as we know more, now that the crystal ball has shown us these things, we can then better interpret where we go from here. So Barbara, I know I'm taking notes on the things you raised, and I'm hoping others will have similar thoughts, and again, open up to everybody. It doesn't have to just be trustees. So. Yes, President McDonald.
Well, insofar as each university is held responsible for its own budget, we should not be surprised that each university comes up with ideas to increase enrollment at its university. And so if we change the way in which universities are measured, and we measure collectively, then you might get more collective activity, but that's not the way in which we're measured. And so we could do things together. I mean, especially when you're considering online programs, because that's really the only way in which we can do a cross the system program. If you're doing it for your own campus, it's really hard to involve another university in that activity. But I mean, universities are putting up programs with very few faculty, perhaps only one faculty member and then part-time faculty. So yeah, there's a lot that could be done together, but I don't think we should be surprised with the fact that universities come up with ideas on their own and move them forward, because that's how the system has measured the universities.
That's great. And Trustee Alexander put a comment in the chat about that too in response, thanking you for that important observation. Thank you. It's a good reminder. And I think I would also say the that unified accreditation conversation too is one that I know ASA also is probably going to be having. So we'll make sure we coordinate with David about that type of conversation. Yes, Trustee Roger Cates.
Thanks. I just wanted to double down on what President McDonald just said. We get reports on unified accreditation successes, which I very much appreciate receiving and learning about. But I also sense that below the surface there still is a great deal of tension with this model of unified accreditation as it is applied to essentially independent universities, all trying to make their own way and all trying to all under the mandate to balance their budgets, as Joe just pointed out. And I'd like to learn a little bit more about where the tensions are and where the roadblocks are to really a more robust implementation of unified accreditation. Maybe it's really hard to get further along than we are, but I'm not sure we've had the kind of in-depth, really candid discussion so we all understand not only how we've gotten as far as we have, which is great, but what might be holding us back from even further success. And again, I love to hear good news. I love to hear successes, but to the extent we're collectively falling short of our goals, why is that? And in particular, from a board perspective, without micromanaging anything, what can the board do to help move the ball down the field? Thanks.
I'd like to jump in and say, I actually think that's a great question, and we can certainly work on a presentation, because there are some external factors that we really have very little control over, that I think it would be a great conversation to have with the trustees to be able to explain some of those barriers that are external. There's certainly plenty of internal that we can work on and move forward, but there are a few external that I think would be an interesting and fascinating conversation to have with the trustees. So I think that would really be a great conversation to have. We can plan that probably for ASA, Jeff, I think maybe.
I'd rather do it here because
I think so
the
too.
issues that are being identified are in no way limited to academic affairs.
Okay.
I think it's an intersectional conversation, and we can make sure that people know that that's going to be on our agenda, so that we can make sure the right people are in the room to have a robust discussion of that. President McDonald, did you want to add something else?
Yeah, I'll give you an example. I mean, the trustees have been pushing very hard for unified catalog. But the way in which we measure ourselves, unified catalog would be very threatening to a small university that does not have a large online presence. So that if students at a university like Farmington had all of the options to take all the online courses that other universities offer, that would be a drain on our credit hours. And so it might be a good thing from a system point of view, but the way in which we measure universities, that would be a loss of revenue for this university. So these things have pluses and minuses, but the way we measure ourselves dictates behavior.
Thank you. It's a great conversation that we definitely need to have, and having it across the various committee silos is a great idea. Go ahead, Trustee Worth.
I just wanted to mention that this was something I brought up with Chair Riley in a conversation about a potential topic for our board retreat when we're talking about this specifically within, unified accreditation, but also the bigger struggle of how do we measure universities as individuals that are competing against each other versus to what degree are we a system that's trying to move forward in one direction with parties that are sometimes self-cannibalizing. So I just want to put that out there that was perhaps a topic that we can bring up again. I'm not sure if the presidents are at that board retreat or not, but I'm hoping it will be brought up.
Thank you. I made a note of that as well.
Hey, I'm just gonna point something out. I think unified accreditation has allowed several of our universities that probably would be on a list to watch, or perhaps not even have earned accreditation without unified accreditation. The reality of how the system was set up, and Joe's comments speak to part of that, but not all of it. And the reality is that slowly but surely the academic world changes. And let me emphasize, it's slowly that it adjusts. Although I'll point out to Joe that he has more things online today than his university had before he got there. And the reality is the academic world moves slowly, but we have been able to expedite that movement at a level that most systems aren't currently seeing. And I think a lot of that has to do with the safety of unified accreditation, what it brings to the system, what it brings to individuals, smaller universities, most particularly in our constellation. And lo and behold, the ability to talk about issues across campuses by faculty members who are actually looking to collaborate at a level that was not seen 6 years ago. And in fact, in many cases, if faculty was trying to get together across campuses, they were likely to be criticized by their fellow faculty at their universities. Now, all of a sudden, we have programs that people are, in fact, trying to design and bring about on a multi-campus basis. Joe frequently points out that given the numbers of students at his university, he has too many tenured faculty members. And we are working and looking at ways to share faculty members in that situation to help pay for those faculty positions to continue by accessing dollars or cooperative efforts on a multi-campus basis that brings revenue to that university, as opposed to always being fearful of losing it. It's not a perfect system yet. Having said that, we are making progress, and one of those very solid signs of progress is that we don't have any universities that are currently on a list by our accreditor, and did not have to go through a separate accreditation, but rather was measured by the strength of the system as opposed to the financial strength of the individual university.
Thank you, Chancellor, and that's a really good reminder. You were saying what I was also thinking, so that's great. Thank you. I appreciate that perspective. When we think about the factors we looked at earlier, I wanted to sort of run through them briefly so that we can think about this fall meeting. I mean, certainly state and federal actions, the legislature adjourning, I think today, they won't be back in session before we meet again in the fall, knock on wood, I think, for their sake and ours. Federal action, certainly we're all watching what's happening in Washington with the budget bill and other pieces of legislation. We'll know more about that as we get into the fall. The work towards R1, UMS transforms, all of these things play a role into our strategic planning work. I think the CBE work, your pace, we specifically mentioned AI. I think we need to, even though he's not here, we need to tell Ryan he's going to help us think that through for the fall with this. The adult degree completion initiative, 90 credit programs, which will be in a more robust position as we head into the fall as well. The marketing initiative, and then the small campus fundraising initiative, all of which will even have more meat on the bones as we get into the fall and can inform our conversation. I'm going to pause and ask what else is coming to people's minds as they think about things we want to discuss or factors that we may not have anticipated yet as we head into a fall refresh look at our strategic planning process. Yep, John.
Yeah, I wonder if we can have a conversation of our senior leadership, which we have 2 presidents retiring, and then we're getting others are heading towards that. Is there goals or planning that we can do around that, along with human resources, so that we're looking specifically for into the future of what our leadership's going to be looking like as it changes?
That's a really smart one. Thank you. That's a good one. We'll add that to our list of factors. Certainly a potentially changing leadership landscape for the system. Yep. That's a good one. Other thoughts? I also will say oh yeah, John, do your hand up again?
And then is there anything we can help the FFT with right sizing the campuses to help move? I know that's been Roger's project, but is there anything that the strategic planning can help FFT with right sizing the individual campuses?
I wonder if it's more a matter of looking at especially because 100% of the initiatives laid out in the strategic plan had been accomplished under the financial set of goals. I wonder if it's looking at, do we need to add some or refresh them in order to support the ongoing work to keep our budget position strong? Roger, I'm maybe putting words in your mouth, but I think
No, that's fine, John. I don't know, John. I hadn't thought about the relationship between that committee and this one. I'd like to give it a little more thought. I don't have a quick response.
Yeah, that's great, Roger. We can think about it for sure. Again, especially in light of the fact that 100% of yours are either done or ongoing, so we can see if there are additional things that would be helpful to the work of FFT, for sure. And we can make the same offer to the other committees as well.
Yeah, John, just by way of information, we made a commitment today to take up the demolition report that the administration had done soon at FFT, and that's certainly a part of what you're talking about.
Fantastic.
Yep.
I would again, forgive me, but what I'd like to point out is filling academic positions across our constellation of universities is a much tighter review process than existed just a few years ago. And it is a multi-step process that is monitored by vice chancellors who have appropriate skill sets, and Ryan Lowe, with respect to the amount of dollars and what it will do to the budget of a particular university. So we have in fact adjusted substantially. Having said that, that does not undo the damage done years ago when people kind of refused to admit that their universities were getting smaller and were filling positions based on prior populations as opposed to current populations, as opposed to what we might at that time have reasonably predicted the population would be. And of course, once tenure is granted, it becomes a much more complicated issue for the university and the system itself. But we are, in fact, a much tighter ship than we were just a few years ago.
Yeah, that's great. Of course. So for the fall meeting, we will continue to take input incoming on this. And I know Carolyn and Jeff are already thinking about what that will look like. If you have additional thoughts or things that come to mind as a result of this meeting today, or as we think about those crystal ball factors, please reach out to me or Jeff or Carolyn to share those thoughts proactively so we can make sure we cover as much as possible. That really brings us to the end of our agenda today. And I think a really good conversation here about where we are and where we're headed, and teeing up some work in the fall at the end of October. Again, October 29th. It'll be Wednesday, the 29th of October at 1 p.m. If you want to wear a Halloween costume, I won't stop you for that meeting. Come as your favorite whatever. But are there any questions or comments before we close the meeting today? Awesome. Beth, do I need a formal motion to adjourn, or can we just adjourn? I don't remember.
No, you can just adjourn the meeting.
Amazing. Well, with that, we are adjourning the meeting of the Strategic Planning Committee. We will see you again in the fall, and appreciate all of you very, very much. Have a great rest of your day and stay
Thanks.
cool. Bye now.
Thank you, Dr. King.
Thanks.